Power can be worn like silk, soft to touch, blinding in beauty. Asterisk, but some kings prefer to wear it like iron, cold, heavy, and built for cages. King Malric was one such man. History remembers him as a reformer, a visionary, a tactician. Asterisk, but behind palace walls, he was something else entirely. Asterisk, a husband who imprisoned his wives in underground rooms. Not for punishment, but for possession. Not in dungeons, not in exile. Asterisk, but in silence, darkness, and carefully curated beauty. Asterisk, he buried them alive. And called it love. The crown of control. Asterisk, King Malric came to power through a war soaked in betrayal. He trusted no one. Not his ministers, not his allies, and least of all, his wives. He believed that beauty drew attention, and attention drew danger. Asterisk, so, when his wives became admired, complimented, even noticed, he began to hide them. The kingdom saw it as privacy, modesty. Asterisk, but those close to the palace knew. His queens weren't reclusive. They were vanishing. Solara, the first. Asterisk, his first queen. Solara was a symbol of hope. A former dancer, she brought joy into the cold marble halls. But joy made Malric uneasy. When a court poet wrote a verse about the queen's laughter, comparing it to spring rain, Malric's paranoia flared. A queen should not be admired. He told his advisors, she is mine, mine to shield, mine to silence. Asterisk, that night, Solara was led down a spiral staircase, told she was going on a spiritual retreat. Asterisk, she descended with hope. Asterisk, and the door was shut behind her. Permanently, the palace beneath the palace underneath the royal castle was a labyrinth. Originally, built as escape routes and cold storage during war. Asterisk, Malric transformed them into heaven chambers. Asterisk, each room was fitted with rugs, paintings, soft beds, and food deliveries through rotating slots. To outsiders, they looked like luxury bunkers. But to the women inside, they were beautifully wrapped coffins. No clocks, no sunlight. Asterisk, no voices, except their own. Every few days, a tray arrived with food. Every few weeks, a maid came to clean, forbidden to speak, only to nod. And always, there was a mirror, not glass, but polished brass. Asterisk, so distorted, it became a liar over time. Years turned to ghosts. Asterisk, one queen counted days by scratching the wall with her hairpin. She lost track after 700. Another made dolls from bread and cloth scraps, whispering to them as companions. Asterisk, and one simply stopped speaking, not from madness, but from despair. The kingdom was told they were ill done in retreat. On pilgrimage, Malric married again and again, each time selecting women who were quiet, graceful, and beautiful enough to hoard. Asterisk, each time they vanished. The kingdom applauded. Asterisk, the irony was cruel. Malric was loved by his people. He reduced grain taxes, built schools, funded hospitals. Asterisk, commoners praised him. Historians celebrated his legacy. Asterisk, even as portraits of his queens disappeared from public halls. Asterisk, even as their names were slowly erased from palace records. No one asked questions. They called him the thoughtful king. Asterisk, but behind the throne was a secret darker than war. The queen, who wrote on the walls. Asterisk, one of the imprisoned women. Kelia refused to fade. She didn't beg, she didn't cry. She wrote, using a sharpened hairpin. She etched words into the stone behind the bed. Asterisk, I am still here. Asterisk, he buried me, but I breathe. Asterisk, this room is not my coffin, it is my evidence. She turned her memory into weaponry. She memorized footsteps above. Asterisk, studied the flicker of torchlight through cracks. Asterisk, and when she heard soft tapping from the room beside hers, she knew she was not alone. Whispers through stone. The woman in the next room was Serana, Malric's third wife, long believed to be dead. They began to tap messages through the walls. Two queens, buried alive, becoming historians of their own suffering. Asterisk, they described the guards, traced maps in the dark, named the pain, kept each other sane. And most of all, they began to plan. Rumors and rot. Asterisk, a few servants whispered of hearing voices from the floors below. Of strange humming during royal feasts. Of mirrors cracking in empty rooms. Asterisk, of flower vases falling over with no wind. Asterisk, once, a maid dropped her sewing needle into a grate. Asterisk, she bent to pick it up and saw, just for a flash, an eye staring back. She never returned to work. The kingdom above, the wives below. Asterisk, by Malric's 15th year as king, 5 of his queens had disappeared. The 6th was newlywed. She smiled in portraits. Asterisk, but her hands trembled. No one questioned it, not out of fear. Asterisk, but because they believed in the illusion. Because Malric was a good king. And the women, they were simply quiet, spiritual. Asterisk, unwell, but history doesn't stay buried. Kelia kept writing, kept listening, kept remembering. The underground didn't break her, it sharpened her. She knew Malric feared the one thing he couldn't silence, memory. And one day, whether through cracks in the stone, whispers from servants, or screams erupting from the earth itself, her story would rise. because even kings must face the voices they try to bury. Asterisk, and even the softest voices echo in stone. Some prisons have walls, others have silence, but the cruelest are those built with love twisted into chains. Asterisk, King Malric thought he had erased them. Asterisk, the women locked beneath his palace, hidden from light, forgotten by history. Asterisk, but history never forgets, it waits, it festers in the dark. Asterisk, and one of his wives, Kelia, was no longer waiting. Asterisk, she was digging. The woman who refused to rot. Asterisk. Kelia had not seen the sky in 7 years. Asterisk, she no longer remembered the smell of morning air, but she remembered his face. Not in love, but in anger. You were too radiant, Malric had said. They looked at you. I can't allow that. So he buried her. Alive, fed her like a pet. Watched her through peepholes, she discovered, and then blocked. Asterisk, but what he didn't realize was that while he buried her body, he unleashed her mind. Kelia wasn't praying for escape. Asterisk, she was plotting justice. The hidden passage, in the scratched map, the underground rooms were meant to be inescapable, but Kelia, like all queens, listened more than she spoke. Asterisk, she memorized the footsteps of guards above. Asterisk, the moisture on her wall told her which side was closest to the palace baths. Asterisk, the rats brought crumbs from the kitchen, telling her which direction smelled of bread. Asterisk, over the years, she used her comb to scratch a crude map beneath her bed. Asterisk, when the stone grew colder, she scratched deeper. Asterisk, when it echoed, she tapped back, and eventually she heard a tap in return. The queen next door. Asterisk, her name was Serana, another vanished wife, separated by stone, connected by rage. Asterisk, they began communicating through the wall. Asterisk, Kelia taught Serana how to mark time. Serana recited poems she remembered from before the darkness. Together, they counted, watched, waited, and dug, not toward freedom, asterisk, but toward revelation, a crack in the throne, asterisk, above ground. Malric had grown older and colder. He spent days alone in his hall. His new advisors rarely saw him. He claimed he was ill, said the palace needed cleansing. But the truth was this: he was being haunted. Asterisk, letters arrived with no names. Asterisk, paintings of former queens were defaced. Asterisk, once, during a royal feast, a servant lifted a silver tray, and inside was a note. Asterisk, she remembers you. The room went silent. Malric's hands trembled. Asterisk, because he knew which she it was. The maid who heard too much. Asterisk, one day, a young servant named Ilya wandered too far near the wine cellar. She felt a draft through a crack in the stone wall. Put her ear to it. Asterisk, heard. Breathing, soft, labored, female. She reported it to no one. Asterisk, instead, she began returning with scraps of food, pushing them through the hole. A whisper came back. Tell no one. Watch the king. Ilya obeyed, because even she could sense that something was about to burst. The tunnels of fire and dust. Asterisk. Kelia and Serana found a weak point. Behind the mirror where the stone had been patched poorly. It took weeks to pry it loose. Asterisk, beneath it was a shaft once used by ancient builders, now forgotten. It was narrow, dry, dangerous, but they descended. Asterisk, ropes, made of torn fabric, torches made of braided hair and oil. Each inch was pain, each breath, risk. But, after all these years, asterisk, they wanted to be seen. The night the earth opened happened during a royal ceremony. Nobles from distant kingdoms had gathered. Asterisk, Malric sat on his high throne, flanked by guards, smiling for portraits, and then a crack. Asterisk, the floor beneath. The dais shuddered. Stone collapsed, dust shot into the air. Asterisk, and from the smoke came two figures, covered in dirt, hair matted, eyes wild. Kelia and Serana had risen. The silence that screamed. Asterisk, no one spoke, not even the guards, because everyone knew what they were seeing. Their faces were in old portraits, their names etched in the royal library as deceased or disappeared, but here they were alive, breathing, burning with quiet fury. Kelia stepped forward. No crown, no jewels. Asterisk, just her voice. You locked us underground to erase your shame, but now we are your shadow. Asterisk, and shadows always rise. The fall that wasn't loud. Malric didn't fight, didn't scream. He simply stood, tried to walk toward them, and collapsed. His knees buckled under the weight of what he'd buried. Not by these, but truth. He was carried out, trembling. Not by soldiers, but by silence. Asterisk, the court never saw him again, and in the palace halls today, their story is carved beneath every mirror. Not as queens, not as victims. Asterisk,